Welcome, everybody. We'll just wait a few more minutes as more people join us for the webinar. It's nice to see you all today, and thank you for joining us all. Okay, just one more minute, I think, and then we'll get started. A few more people still entering the waiting room at the moment. Okay, I think we'll get started. Hopefully you can all see the slides up on the screen and you can all hear me okay. Please do just let us know if you're having any issues in the chat. We just ask that you all remain on mute throughout the presentation part of the webinar, and we'll have an open Q&A after the presentation. So if you are speaking or want to ask a question, please pop your hand up on the screen and we'll go to you and ask you to unmute at that point. So I just want to say, first of all, again, a huge thank you for coming today for our first lunchtime seminar of the new Centre for Innovation in Fatherhood and Family Research webinar series. This webinar series follows on from a popular series that we ran in 2023, which was the final year of funding for the first part of Following Young Fathers Further, a Future Leaders Fellowship study funded by UKRI. Lots of people came along to those various sessions to hear from experts in a range of different fields and disciplines about a variety of different topics of relevance to the study and of the experiences of young fathers aged 25 and under. This study was foundational to the Centre for Innovation in Fatherhood and Family Research, which is based at the University of Lincoln. This was established in 2023. I'm the director of that study, so I'm Anna Tarrant. I'm a professor of sociology at the university. Before we launch into the report launch today, I just want to make you all aware that this session is being recorded. We share the videos and the recordings on the Following Young Fathers Further website, and we'll be putting a link to that website in the chat for you throughout the session. If you do have any concerns or if there's anything in the recording that you're not comfortable with, please do just get in touch with us, and we can edit that before we put that on the website. Before we talk about the report and the key findings, I just want to say a little bit more about the Research Centre. A core ambition of this centre as a specialist research and enterprise centre is really to strengthen family and societal wellbeing via fatherhood and family-focused research. And core to all of our approaches and methodologies is the use of innovative participatory methods, the development of university community partnerships, and also dialogues with existing data. And the report we present today is based on one of our collaborations, one of those university community partnerships. Our objectives as part of the centre are to bring together researchers from varied disciplines and sectors so that we can respond to key national and global challenges, to offer our expertise in research, evaluation and consultancy to local, regional and national agencies, and with a particular focus on father inclusion. So how do we develop support environments across the health and welfare system that are inclusive of fathers, but to the benefit of women and children as well. Our aims are to address social inequalities, to promote gender equality in prosperous communities, and to pioneer, as I mentioned, methodologically innovative and interdisciplinary research partnerships. We're also very keen to think about the co-creation of support groups for dads and also different learning programmes as well. And I think the prison sector and the criminal justice system is one core area where this might be achieved. In terms of research, we're also keen to support the development of postgraduate research students as well, and early career researchers in the core thematic areas of fatherhood and family research. So just some context there to the centre. More recently, we've also launched the Father Inclusion Hub. So this is a new website. It's a living archive of what works in father inclusive support. It's in its very early days. We launched it last week with Small Steps, Big Changes, a Nottingham-based charity or organisation, I should say, who have been funded to develop a father inclusion strategy for Nottingham. We've also got a range of different resources on there from national organisations who specialise in support for fathers. It is a living archive, so we're really keen to identify national examples of good practice and what works in being father inclusive. So it's both a learning site and a resource site, all open access. Currently, we're looking at different ways of sort of promoting different materials and resources. But if you've got an example of good practice that you'd like to share on this website, it might be research-based, it might be very practice-based, please do get in touch, and we'd like to have a conversation with you about how we might do that. Okay, so to the main focus of today. So today we're launching our new report, presenting research we've conducted in collaboration with PACT to improve understanding of young fathers and their experiences in prisons. Debbie, who's going to be speaking today, approached us around 2022, we think. We were trying to work out how long it was ago that we first had our initial conversation about this work. They were looking at bidding for family services in the young people's estate and had identified the need to focus on support for young fathers. And given that we were doing a longitudinal programme research on young fathers, so young men aged 25 and under when they first become a parent, that collaboration aligned really well. PACT, as I'm sure many of you will already be aware, is a pioneering national charity in the UK that supports prisoners, people with convictions and their children and families. I'm actually going to be handing over to Nikki Pierce, who is a research assistant for the Following Young Fathers Further study at the time, who's going to talk about the findings. And then Debbie and her colleague Kelly Rogers from PACT are going to talk about how they've responded to the research findings that we've developed with young fathers and how they've translated those and implemented them for practice. I should just say that the QR code there takes you directly to the report, which is on the Following Young Fathers Further website. So if you do have a phone, please do use that to link you to the full report. The report is called Care in the Prison Estate, and we look at the importance of redemptive, compassionate and family-focused support for young fathers. Again, this is a sub-project of Following Young Fathers Further. So this is a major qualitative longitudinal programme of research, and perhaps one of the most comprehensive and in-depth programmes of research about young fatherhood globally. There's a huge amount of work in the US and obviously the work that we're doing in the UK, some emerging work in areas like South Africa, but on a broader international scale, the extent to which we've been able to follow the parenting journeys, the support needs of young fathers over time is currently unparalleled. We've used qualitative longitudinal methodologies. So we've not only got snapshots of young dads and their current experiences, but we've interviewed them over multiple periods of time to look at their journeys. And that includes their journeys through different services and systems. And this is where our interest in young fathers in prison settings has become really key. For some of the subsample of our young fathers, they've been prison experienced, they've been in and out of the prison system. In this case, we actually went into prisons and talked to young fathers in situ. Again, a big part of our approach is about participatory design. So again, we work with and then work in collaboration with professionals across health and social care sectors, so that we can respond to some of the questions and maybe the gaps in knowledge and evidence that professionals have, and create knowledge that then is part of a cycle of what we call practice-based research to research-based practice. And that's a language that Bren Neal, my co-author of a book we published in 2023, has developed. But essentially our core ethos with our research is about working with young fathers, working with professionals to capture what matters to fathers as a starting point for what needs to happen in practice and policy. So again, this project and this study aligned really well with those key factors. Before I pass over to Nikki to talk about the findings that are presented in the report, the study in brief is an in-depth qualitative study exploring the lived experience and support needs of young fathers who became a father aged 25 and under and are currently in prison. Our aim was to understand how some of the most marginalised young fathers experience parenting while separated physically from their children, including the extent to which they receive and experience support while in the prison system. The findings are based on data generated from in-depth interviews with 12 young fathers in prison and with 4 professionals from PACT providing support. Again, the study helped us to identify some of the more distinctive issues that these highly marginalised and vulnerable young men experience in the UK as a basis for informing more inclusive support for them. Just in terms of the sample of 12, I think it's noteworthy that this was a mixed ethnicity sample. 4 of the young men were white British, 1 was a traveller, 1 white European. We had 3 Black Caribbean fathers and then 3 of mixed heritage. So relative to the broader ethnic characteristics of the UK, there was a high percentage of young men in this small sample of 12 who were mixed ethnicity and also from lower income circumstances and backgrounds. So that's just some context to who the participants are. And we're going to hear from the voices of the young fathers next from Nikki. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Nikki Pearce and I was, as Anna said, her research assistant in 2023. I'm now her PhD student, which is brilliant. But whilst I was a research assistant, I undertook this participant interviews with the young fathers in prison, along with my colleague Georgie Nichols, who's also here today. So we visited 2 young offenders institutes in the course of our research in 2023. And talking to the young men, they were all very engaged fathers. They wanted to be part of their children's lives. But we were asking them how they felt about being in prison as a father. And a general theme was that they felt isolated and infantilized by the prison officers. They said that their identity as fathers was not recognised by prison staff or even respected by a lot of them. So we just a quote here from Lyle, who was aged 19 when he first became a father. He talks about how they're treated. He was fed like chicken nuggets and hoops, and he says, you know, I'm supposed to be an adult, but they're treating us like children. Thanks, Anna. I haven't got access to for some reason I can't move the slides on. I don't know why. I do apologise. So their identities as father are not officially recorded by prison staff as they enter prison, and these are only discovered informally through engagement with young men over time. Thanks, Hannah. So Fletcher, who was aged at 19 when we interviewed him, they come to the cell and they look and they see pictures and like, oh, you've got a baby. It's not like they say when you first come, oh, you've got a baby, this and that. It's just like it just happens. So they don't ask when you're coming into jail. And I thought this was quite pertinent what you said after this. So they ask you if you're on drugs. Do you need any help with that? But why? Same with people that are on drugs. You want to get them off them, but help to see if they need like help with their babies as well. So I thought that was quite poignant that he said that if they're asking to support with drug use, but they're not talking about fatherhood, which is probably as important as being supported with drugs. Thanks, Anna. Um, Another issue that we found when we were talking to them was like sustaining communication relationships with their children. So they had contact challenges, difficulties maintaining contact due to restrictions, due to financial barriers, the kind of the cost of calls out of prison, the cost of emailing out of prison, the cost of them receiving emails and receiving phone calls as well. So Theo, who's 26 at the time, was interviewed, but he was a young father. He'd been in prison throughout his child's life. He found out his partner was pregnant before he was admitted to prison. She can email me, but costs money. So it's just I feel guilty telling her to, email me, even to send photos on there. It's an extra amount of money. So all communications, the prison are charging the prisoners for. And then he talked about letter writing. I asked him about letter writing. He said, yeah, I do write letters, but it can take them a month to get the letters. So he kind of commented that there was not much point because he might have spoken to them on the phone in the meantime or emailed. Thank you, Anna. So another issue that came up was co-parenting arrangements. So some of them were still in relationships with the mother of their children. Some have had some relationships had broken down. Some maintain contact as friends. But a lot of them were strained relationships. And Jackson was quite intuitive, and he said, if your child with the mother, your relationship with your child depends on the relationship with the mother. So if you can't be bitter, and you've got to be, you've got to push away from that, because if you're bitter with the mother of the child, then you're not going to get to see your child. So it was telling really that they were really reliant on outside relationships with the mother of the child, relationships with wider family to actually support them. So we found that they need support in prison to manage their co-parenting relationships. And I know this is what PAC do, and they're going to talk about that later on. Thanks, Anna. Another key issue, which I found quite surprising, was that they aren't on birth certificates, even though they're acknowledged as the father of the child. They can't physically go to the registration, so it prevents them being named on the birth certificates. They need more support and help in securing responsibility. There's also a prohibitive cost, so they can apply to have their name put on the birth certificate, but it needs to be approved by the mother of the child as well, and it costs them £100 if they're not actually at the physical registration. And this was really upsetting to a lot of them because, as Vince says here, it's my daughter, and imagine my daughter growing up looking at her birth certificate and it not seeing her dad's name on it. So it's not just affecting the young men, but it also affects their relationships and how the child views themselves if they don't have that father on the birth certificate. Thank you. So PACT do provide a lot of support, and it's a holistic support valued by the prisoners, by the young men in prison, sorry. They provide education, relationship advice, mental health support, and financial management. They do life skills and they have courses about victim impact awareness, which PAC support the young men with. Thanks, Anna. So these young men really valued PACT. Every single one of them, without fail, praised PACT. And when we were in the prisons, in the Young Offenders Institute, the PACT workers worked incredibly hard. They were running from cell to cell, from wing to wing, making sure that they're supporting these young men. And at most times, there's only one or two of them in the prison at the time, but they work incredibly hard, and they've always got time for these young men. A prison might stop them, and they would automatically stop and say, "Yeah, I know what you know. I've had your email, I've had your note. I will get to you. Don't worry." And so they always know that PACT are thinking about what support they are going to be providing. And Marvin, age 24 here, says that they can support you through anything that you go through, any challenges you're going through, difficulty seeing your child or not seeing enough of your child. There's actually support there. Even if they don't come to you, you can go to them and be that voice and make it known. So they were really, really praiseworthy of PACT and how they supported them with their fatherhood challenges. Thank you. Other things that PACT do are the family days, and we happened to be in one of the Young Offenders Institute when one of the family days was going on, and it was lovely to see. It was like a little party, really, with lots of different children running around in the play area, painting, photographs being taken, cuddles and laughter, and kind of making connections with their children and their wider family. A member of PACT staff was there taking photographs, so that and then they would provide the young men with the photographs after the family day, so that they could have them on the cell walls, pictures with their children, their family, and that was lovely to see. So this is what Seb, who's 22, said about the family days. But on the family day, I can hold my girlfriend's hand and no one can say anything. It's just, yeah, I think there's more like a physical thing. Like, it's nice, isn't it? It's just like, I don't know, it's just a good time. And I just thought this last little bit that he says, it's 2 hours of nothing but love in it. And this is what's different to the actual formal prison visits, where they're not allowed to touch, they're not allowed to interact with their children. Where on the family days, they feel like they are part of the family again, and that helps them with their rehabilitation and their kind of feeling of engagement as a father. Thanks, Anna. And I just wanted to end on this because I was revisiting the data the other day with Anna, and I just saw this that Vince said. He's only 18, 20 now, because we maybe coming up to 20 now. And I asked him, what would you say that the best thing about being a father is? And he said, all of it, really, innit? What's to hate about being a father? When you're there and you're with your kid and stuff, there's nothing better than that, man. It's wonderful. Really, it is. And I just think that shows, that represents how all the young men, the 12 young men that we spoke to, felt about being a father. They all wanted to be part of their children's life. They accepted that they'd done wrong. None of them said they shouldn't have been there. They all accepted that, but they all said, being a father has made me change, and I don't want to be back here. And I don't want to be involved in criminality. I want to make sure that I'm there for my children. And that's where I'm going to end.
Thank you, Nikki. So on the basis of these really pertinent findings, we've developed a range of conclusions and recommendations. I think it's really important to state that perhaps these findings aren't surprising in lots of ways. Of course, these men love their children, but we're researching these men in a context of absent fatherhood as a dominant discourse, particularly around low-income men. And of course, these are men who are a population who are physically removed from their children and from their families and communities because they're in the prison system. But what I think is core here is just how important that consistent support is for these young men. Again, as Nikki said, investing in the fatherhood identity as a rehabilitative and also a redemptive approach. What's really core, I think, to the ethos of PACT, and something that I think is valuable for us all to think about, regardless of which context we're working in, is that these care-driven and compassionate approaches are highly valued by young fathers, but also mean that they have longer term implications for when go back into the community, and when they invest in those identities as fathers. In terms of our recommendations for PACT, so we advised about the importance of raising further awareness of the PACT offer nationally, and also with young fathers themselves. So some of them did talk about the fact that they weren't aware of the offer. So again, providing leaflets and advertising programs that are available for them within the prison system, I think is really key here. So there's a question here about communication, and the extent to which different kinds of support on offer in the estate are known by the people there. We recommend a nationally consistent provision of fatherhood programmes, and we know that there are a whole load of programmes nationally doing really excellent work to support men as fathers. Previously, in the past, we've worked with Kate Bullman, for example, from Oak Hill Secure Training Facility, where there was a really important award-winning provision of fatherhood programmes. Again, we know the young dads really benefit from that kind of engagement, and they take that with them into the resettlement process as well. Albeit in a context where support for fathers kind of drops off when they're back into the community. They need bespoke support for co-parenting and rights issues. We were particularly struck by how few of them were on the birth certificate. Obviously, those who became a dad while in the prison system were unable to attend those appointments. And the £100 fee for many of these young men to become named on birth certificates was out of reach for them. And not only are they losing rights to their children, but children lose rights to their fathers as well. And that's highly problematic when we know that positive father engagement, positive father inclusion and involvement has significant impacts for children and young people and for broader family well-being. We encouraged much greater engagement with co-parents. There's a whole range of different reasons why a co-parent might be unable to visit the father or visit their partner. Geographical distance, costs, all of those things can be prohibitive. But what we found is that greater support from PACT to be a bit of a broker for those relationships was really powerful in ensuring those longer term sets of relationships. We also recommend advocacy for privacy for these young men, particularly when engaging with and communicating with their children, and securing photographs on their behalf as well. All of the dads talked about the importance of having imagery of their children and being able to share those and to celebrate their fatherhood identity in a very visual way in their cell. Finally, we also recommend more longitudinal research with young men. So we've very much engaged with them on a one-off basis based on this current project. But there's something to be said about following their journeys, I think, in and through these different experiences so that we capture more of a dynamic picture of what it is that's going on. I think in doing that, what we'll be able to see is the longer term impacts of fatherhood programs and father support in the prison system when those young men do go out back into the community and when they have resettlement experiences, should they get to that point. A bit of research that we did in 2017 found that young men had responded so well to the fatherhood program in the secure training centre, but when they went back out into the community, the ideas around father involvement and the value of that weren't understood necessarily, and they weren't responded to in the same way. So there's something here about collective and collaborative working, multi-agency working with those young men when they get to that point in their journey. Okay, so I'm going to pass over now to Debbie, who is going to tell us a bit more about PACT, about their offer, and how they've translated these findings into practice.
Thank you. So hello, I'm Debbie Hornbuckle and I'm the Programme and Learning Lead for PACT, and this is my colleague Kelly Rogers. In my role, I work with academic experts in relationship education, as well as people with lived experience, and to develop and deliver courses and resources to people in prison and on probation. The collaborative relationship with Anna Tarrant and the team has enabled us to explore how better to support young dads in prison. And I'd like to thank them for their work and enabling us to present here today. Next slide, please. So we work for an organisation called PACT, which is the Prison Advice and Care Trust. It's a pioneering national charity that supports prisoners, people with convictions, and their children and families. We provide caring and life-changing services at every stage of the justice system, in court, prison, on release, and in the community. Next slide, please. Our volunteers and staff support people in courts, prisons, probation services, and communities across England and Wales. And we're a diverse, inclusive, modern, and collaborative charity. We build effective partnerships and sustainable solutions based on our well-established understandings of the systems in which we work and the historic values and ethos we've developed through our 120 plus years of service delivery. Next slide, please. As you can see, we work across prisons and the community, and we deliver a range of services. Our work in programmes and learning is interwoven in many of these services, and the work we've developed in response to this research will provide resources beyond the prisons where the research was carried out. So we work in 62 public sector prisons, and when we talk about this, we work in the visitor centres to support families as well as the prisoners. We support children through play and delivering family days and visits. We deliver our relationship programmes. We have mentoring services. We have social workers in women's prisons. We also manage the National Prisons Families Helpline, and we support people through volunteering in court. We offer grants to people and their families, particularly when they're about to resettle. And we offer training and advice to practitioners. I did notice that someone had asked the question about where we work, so hopefully this has answered that question. But also we support students who can come and volunteer and work with us as part of their degrees. And we have ways to contact us to find if you're interested in volunteering. So that's a big shout out to anyone who might be interested in our services and supporting us further. Next slide, please. So we know that maintaining family ties plays a crucial role in reducing reoffending, and we're serious about cutting crime and delivering safer communities. We must support prisons to stay in touch with families where it is safe to do so. Next slide, please. So when we talk about our impact, this is about our learning and programmes. So we are incredibly proud of the work that we've been able to do and how we can share our courses and resources with so many people impacted by imprisonment, and the development work from this research will also enable us to support more people, not just specifically around the people that we've worked with in the prisons for this research. So there will be legacy work that we can spread across prisons and the community, which we're really keen to do. Next slide, please. So over to Kelly. Can you introduce this short video that we have for you?
Of course. So this short clip that we've put together is from one of our programs that we've run in HMP ISIS. So it gives an overview of what the young men do on the course and how they've used it in practice. So it's and you may just need to come out to play it, but hopefully.
Kelly, I've made you a co-host. Are you able to share? Because I don't have the link.
Oh, sure. That's
Thank you. Thank you all. We'll be 1 minute while we just get that set up for you.
try and skip that as quick as possible. That's the wrong video.
New Muller Light, now with vitamins,
Apologies.
and it's thicker.
Oh, check you out being all
We've been running these workshops at ISIS now for a few months, and this is the 4th workshop. It's really a short course, parenting course, that allows you to think about how you can be a good dad from prison, a better dad from prison, how you can keep contact with your children. It's really important to us that children stay connected with their families, because 40% of prisoners who are incarcerated lose contact with their family. On a normal domestic visit, prisoners are not allowed to get up from their chairs. So there's not a lot of flexibility, and they don't feel that they can hug their children or kiss their children. So it's very rigid.
I can't really play with him. There's a play area, but the prisoners ain't really allowed to go in there. And I'm allowed to pick him up and like hold him and that, but that's about it really.
Time to Connect is different from other parenting courses because it's very play focused. The course has got a lot of practical activities in it rather than just somebody standing up in front of a classroom.
I just want to upgrade what I know about looking after children, so I have better skills and better knowledge of looking after a child once I'm out.
It could help me do more stuff to be a better dad, like, basically, and help you like bond more with your child.
I want to talk to people about how it could affect my child and what I could do better.
You've got a cardboard box in front of you, and what I would like you to do is I'd like you to make something out of that cardboard box. There's some cards here, there's glitter, there's paint, there are stickers, and you can make anything you want, and you will be giving this to your child. The purpose of the box activity is to get the men to realise that you don't need expensive toys to play with your children. And actually being creative and painting and decorating a box and making something out of it is actually quite fun and something very simple they can do with their children.
When they give us the box and that, I thought to myself, why am I doing this? But then after getting into it, it actually came into my head that it is a way to just get involved with the children. So it helps. It helps a lot.
When I'm playing with my child, I won't see it as just playing now. I'll see it as like, I'll see it a bit deeper than that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I'll just reshare my screen.
So what we've learnt then from this is that we know that young people can be very complex. Added in the complexities of them also being young dads, we recognise that our offer has to be bespoke for each person, for each individual. And so as part of that, we've developed a set of casework resources, which I'd like Kelly just to talk to you about, and how we use these with the young men.
If you can move to the next slide for me, please. So working with the young men in HMP Feltham, we talked to them about their fatherhood journey and what was relevant and useful for them to be using. So we had quite a few of the people on case, we were working with through casework that had pregnant partners. So we created our resource called Let's Talk Pregnancy, which is done as a journal and an information guide. So it's a week by week guide that goes through what's happening with the baby, what's happening with mum, and gives them a space to sort of reflect on how they're feeling about it and what do they need to do, what can they do to support their partners around this. So we trialled that at Feltham, got some very positive feedback about it. which then led on to the birth certificate resource. So using the tools and resources that we already had around supporting young men to get on the birth certificate, it lays out a very structured way of how to support if they do have very good contact with their baby's mum or not. And we've also referenced in the NEPAC's guidance in and around this as to support with collaborative working, and then parental responsibility. And what does that mean? So it's very much if you have parental responsibility, what does that mean you can do, can't do, and just supports with casework in and around when there is challenges, what can they do to overcome them. And then our two Let's Talk Early Years at the bottom there are very similar to the pregnancy journal. So it's a child development milestone structure. So this is what's happening with baby, this is what's happening, what should you be looking out for, what can you be looking ahead for, and then that journaling and reflective space to show what they are thinking about to do with their children at that time. So it's a space for them to really think about what they'd like to say to their children and what could they do to support mum out in community. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry, I was on mute then. There's always one. Thank you so much to Debbie and to Kelly for sharing those great resources. I know from a very sort of personal point of view and perspective, it'd be great to be able to feature those on the Father Inclusion Hub if possible and if they're open access. But again, yeah, really fantastic. And what's really lovely is to see how the evidence base is being shared and translated into practice in a really practical and effective way. And again, perhaps longer term, there's some evidence we can generate around the impacts of that on the young dads themselves, to see what the broader outcomes have been for them. Lovely. Do we have any questions or reflections from anyone who is in the room with us? If you'd like to pop your hand up and I'll unmute once I've selected you. Any questions or reflections at all? Yeah, M13 Young Dads.
Hi, sorry, my name's Robert, not Young Dads.
Hi, sorry, I just had to do the screen name.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I work in Manchester for the Young Dads Project. We we're sort of like commissioned by the City Council to run a project for dads under the age of 21 across Manchester. So anybody. And sorry, what I wanted to say is some of what I've heard really chimes with what we our experience of working with young dads as well. I'm just really impressed with some of the resources that you've shown us today as well. But the question I wanted to ask is going back to the very first, right at the beginning when you talked about the research linking with or addressing some of the key challenges. What can you tell us what those challenges were or are?
Yeah, sure. As in about young fathers in general?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, we didn't have a lot of time to go into some of the core findings from the broader Following Fathers Further study. But essentially what we found with the young dads that we've engaged with over time, we have looked at a broad sample. So some of those young men are living already in low socioeconomic circumstances. Some are in education still, higher education, as well as school. Some are perhaps already employed, but what we see is quite a lot of engagement in sort of low income, low pay work, which contributes to some of the disadvantage. We know that young fathers are a highly stigmatized group in general. In public and policy discourse, there's a tendency to refer to them as absent, as feckless, deadbeat, really deficit-based narratives that assume that they're disinterested in their children. And the wealth of data that we have across that entire study, which has been running now for over a decade, is just how much they are committed to being there for their children and developing those strong bonds and relationships. But the key challenges relate to a whole relate to a whole range of different social processes. So they relate to challenges in securing longer term work and or getting educational qualifications, housing crises and issues. We know from the research that young fathers are some of the most disadvantaged in the housing system, particularly when they're single. They're not asked if they're a dad, and often get placed in like hostels, for example, where there might be health and safety concerns or safeguarding concerns, so they can't see their children. We know in terms of their relationships with different services and systems that because they're fathers, they're often seen as secondary or periphery parents. So there's an element where mums are kind of, or services are mother-centric, and of course that's really important. But what that means is that dads aren't then always recognised as a resource to their partner or to their co-parent if they're no longer together. So that kind of what we say is sidelining, and also elements of surveillance can also make them feel secondary of the parent, and means that some of the broader challenges they're having around maybe homelessness or being unable to bring in financial income, all those kinds of things, which also impact on mental health and well-being as well over time, become heightened and become even more problematic. There's an overview of the broader study findings on the Following Young Fathers Further website, and Bren Neal and I have also published in the Dynamics of Young Fatherhood book as well. So if you do want to read further on those broader findings, please do let us know. Thank you. I hope that answers your question.
Just one more thing, sorry, just really quickly. So one thing that struck me was the fact that as those young people, those young dads weren't able to, during family visits, weren't able to, or most times are not able to touch their child. We work on the basis, well, we started looking at baby brain development and the development, the development through relationships between dad and child, and how baby brain development, sort of like the impact of decisions made, or the impact of the impact that things like touch, things like holding, just showing love, showing vulnerability has on a child. And I'm wondering whether something like that could be looked at in terms of having that change when these young dads are have these visits.
Yeah, I'll pass over to Debbie on that one, because if that's okay, Debbie, because my understanding is the family days do allow for that. They allow for that physical interaction in ways that other visits don't, and that's what they really value.
Absolutely. And even normal visits, there will be an element of a family sitting together, but the dad won't be able to get up and move around a room with his child and interact and play with them on a normal visit. And a family visit enables them to do much more hands-on dad-like things. So I think that's probably the biggest difference, is that on a normal visit they wouldn't be able to go into the play area and play with their child, but on a family day there is lots of activities to enable more interaction and more sort of development in that relationship around play and cuddling and doing lots of different stuff together.
Right.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to go over to Sarah Beresford next.
Yeah, just quickly, many of you will be familiar with the work I'm doing on child impact assessments, but I'll just put it in the chat. And just to say it's designed to support children, but I know it's being used in some parenting courses in prison to help parents in prison have an insight into the impact on their children and how to have conversations with their children. And then there's also been some people looking at working with very young children, which is probably more likely the case with young fathers. So it's something just to flag up. And then also just slightly on a tangent but related, we've just done some work looking at children whose brothers are in prison, and many, of course, of the young fathers that you're talking to will also be brothers. So I'll put that in there as well, just for people's interest. But thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, we had one young man who was in prison with his own father as well. So again, sort of, with sort of compressed generational kind of parenting, I guess, where you have teenage pregnancy that extends across generations and within particular localities, then yeah, that circumstance might also be apparent and be something that they experience. So thank you, and do get in touch if you've got resources you'd like to share on the Father Inclusion Hub. Thank you. Dave Edwards.
Yeah, hi everyone. Dave Edwards from the Department for Work and Pensions. I work on the Reducing Parental Conflict team. So we're beginning to think about and look at fathers in prison and the relationship stress that puts upon them. So just really interested to hear anything from Anna or the PACT team around work in that area, or any insights in that area. I know tensions were mentioned in the presentation. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that? Just really aware this is an area that we're quite interested in government at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, from our point of view, we then followed up and did lots of interviews with young dads, and we also spoke to the prison about being a dad in prison, and they said that a lot of young men don't want to tell the prison, don't want to tell authorities that they're parents because of the fear about social services and having poor relationships with their partners as well. So that's a really big thing. So it's about how you can sort of support the prison and support a person in prison as well as a co-parent. So there's lots of dynamics going on. So our family team is sort of a holder of lots of different relationships within that context as well, I'd say. We also noted that a lot of the young men were at very different parenting points in their journeys. So when we were commissioned to deliver a parenting course, we didn't know who could attend that course because we had dads who were expectant, so to speak. So it was too early in their journey to sort of attend a course, and they didn't like being in a group together because of lots of different challenges within the prison about being in the same room as other people. And I think the other thing as well for us is really about the labelling that they experience throughout their young lives. So they are called offenders, they are called gang members, they are called drug dealers, they're called difficult, they're called violent, but the label that they're not called is a dad. And so what we want to do is we want to ensure that at the very heart of who they are, that they recognise that they are a dad and that is important to them. And I think that that's a really critical thing for young parents and parents in prison, is that people recognise that label. So even if they aren't even in contact, they're still a dad. And how do we support that parenting journey for people who have contact with their children, but also don't, but want to still be recognised as a dad? So there's lots and lots of complexities. And lots of support that we can give them through these resources, even if they're not in contact with their children, on how we can try to support those relationships in a really safe way as well, which I think is also important.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just in response, that's really helpful to hear. And in sharp contrast, I have been to a previous presentation from a women's charity working with women who have an experience of prison, and that is worlds apart from what I'm hearing today. Very different experience from that charity. Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
I think just to come in on...
Sorry, Dave, if you want any more information, please, I think all our information is here, so you can always reach out. Happy to talk to you again about anything else.
Thanks, Deborah. I'll do that. I'll get in touch.
Good.
Thanks. Just to come in on that as well. So I'm doing some training at the moment with a charity called Only Mums, Only Dads, which provides support or engage with Dave's nodding, but around issues of parental conflict and how family law can engage with fathers. I think that the core thing with all of this is that it's about ensuring that any engagement is risk assessed to some extent, and about checking that that any engagement with mum is a positive one and is more child focused if it needs to be. There are some obviously really difficult political dynamics here potentially, particularly if there's been separation or where there's been violence in the past. So it's about that balance, I think, of kind of the risk-based framing and the rehabilitative framing and the redemptive framing, being aware of those different framings and the extent to which they should be applied, I think is core in all of this, just to ensure that the safety and the well-being of the family and of the individuals within the family is paramount as well. Doug, would you like to go next? Thank you for your patience.
That's okay. Thank you, Anna. Great report. Anna, one of the things we've been looking at and working with NEPACS on is when the young dads are going to be released back into the areas that we work in, is how we can support those young men when they're being released from prison. We met with the departure lounge manager quite a while ago, and they get the referral for the young man 12 weeks before release. And we talked about how we could hopefully go into the prison and work with that young man before he's released, so he has that support on the outside as well. Because I know there's quite a lot of support on the inside, but when he comes out, sometimes there isn't any support, and we want to continue supporting that fatherhood journey. But what we're finding is there's a lot of red tape involved in that, and it's taken time to do it. And I don't know if anybody has any experience in that, because what we're wanting to do is try and support that young dad in prison, so when he comes out, instead of having a list of names and contacts to get in contact with, he already has that relationship with us as a young dad service, so we can support him on that. But it's a long and difficult journey at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. So I've just popped a link in the chat to a paper or report that was written in 2017 that I referred to in the webinar there. So we worked with Kate Bullman, who was at Oak Hill STC at the time. She developed this award-winning fatherhood program, and that was exactly her observation. So she was talking to fathers, young fathers as well, in this situation, about the value of fatherhood. Going back out into the community where that kind of culture and those discussions weren't being had. And essentially a core finding for us was that they went out of prison and fell off a cliff a little bit, really, in terms of support. So no one agency really took responsibility or were able to support that young man. So in this project, we had a bit of impact funding, and basically Kate became a support worker for 5 young men who had sort of transitioned out of Oak Hill during the time of the study. And the things that she was helping with was, trying to get a passport off one of the dad's mums, because that was being withheld and he couldn't get a bank account. It was really, basic kind of life things that these young men needed to reestablish themselves. But what that report highlighted is exactly what you're saying, Doug, is that no one service is really able to, or is picking up that support and that work. So I think there's a case here for advocacy for that, for identifying where there's specialist support. As we know, North East Dads and Lads is pretty nationally distinctive, really, as a young dad support charity. There are moving on services, and of course young dads will be present at those. But yeah, I think there's some work to do. I don't have the answer necessarily, but work to do to think about how we stop those young men falling through the gaps once they go into the resettlement process. Hopefully that answers the question.
And I think some of the professionals that we interviewed as part of this research also had that frustration as well. They felt like they wanted to continue to support in the community, but they couldn't, and they wanted to find ways that they could. And yeah, the red tape, they said, and kind of matching up services was a real difficulty. So it's something that I think needs to be looked at.
Thank you. We've got 2 minutes left, but I'd like to ask Holly to ask her question.
Hi, thank you. I work for, I'm freelance, but I'm working on a project for an organisation called Spark Inside, who deliver coaching to young men in custody. And for the last couple of years now, we've been working on a programme called Being Well, Being Equal, which is focused on the mental health and well-being of young men in custody, primarily young black men. And at the moment, we're working with young black men to better understand their mental health needs and how we can promote their well-being and mental health in custody. And one of the issues that is coming up time and time again is about their roles as fathers and their identity as fathers. So it's really good to hear that Debs was talking about how important it is to shift their sense of identity and to a pro-social sense of identity as a father. And I just wondered, in your research, how and whether fathers talked about the impact of being separated from their children or considering their roles as fathers, and how that impacted on their mental health and emotional well-being. And second question, sorry if I can, how has the programme that PACT's developed, how does that consider the needs of Black and minority ethnic groups, specifically in terms of the diversity, given that we know that there's an overrepresentation of young Black men in the youth estate?
Thank you. Nikki, would you like to respond to that question?
Sure. Yeah, there was a lot of frustration and a kind of lot of grief that they could not be part, or they couldn't have contact or regular contact with their children. Yeah, and it did cause them. I know a couple of the young men were on antidepressants and suffered from anxiety because of that, because they'd been kind of wanting to be engaged and excited about the pregnancy, and obviously then they'd been incarcerated, and yeah, it does take a toll on their mental health. And I think what PACT do is, they try and build that bridge if there's no bridge there. But I'll let Debbie or Kelly talk about the ethnic minority fathers, if that's okay.
No, just to add as well, I think one thing that's really apparent across, again, the whole sets of data that we've generated with young fathers is that feeling of social isolation and loneliness. So that can be both community-based, but then also within prisons as well. And that really feeds into some of that grief and that sense of loss, alongside the financial costs of being able to communicate effectively with child, with co-parent. So what these support programs are doing, and they're replicating what's happening in the community, where there are specialist support groups to some extent, but they create a space for peer support as well. And just watching the video that Kelly shared, what's so apparent is that it's a community of young men who've been brought together around that shared identity, and how powerful that is in terms of addressing, not entirely necessarily, but certainly ameliorating some of the mental health challenges that arise both from being in prison and then also from being separate from children. So yeah, I think it's not to be underestimated, that kind of one-to-one bespoke support and peer support alongside other kinds of support. Debbie, I'll let you come in now and then we'll end, so we are 2 minutes over.
Yeah, I suppose, Polly, in answer to what you asked, we worked with, we had a forum where we spoke to, I think it was 6 dads in Feltham. So the work that we developed was based upon those 6 voices, I suppose, is what I would say. But what you've said is really interesting, and probably would be a consideration of where this goes next, I think, in terms of what we did, because it's not specific to anything in terms of diversity, but like you say, it's an interesting next step to think about what that might look like. So Polly, I can pick this up with you. I know we work quite closely with one another, so I'll probably come to you and pick your brains about that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just to reiterate, thank you so much to everyone for attending today. Apologies for slightly overrunning. A big thank you to Nikki for sharing the findings from the report, but especially to Kelly and to Debbie. This has been a really constructive, productive, I think, collaboration, and a really important example again of how developing an evidence base can help to increase and improve support and the lot for these young men through a focus on their fatherhood identities. We will put the recordings of the webinar on the Following Young Fathers Further website. I'm going to pop in the chat as well, but please do get in touch with us if there's anything that's sparked your interest from this, or if you think there are gaps or things that we need to do more on and think more about. These webinars are very much about a space for future conversation as well as for presenting where we're at currently. So we're very open to those kinds of conversations, so do keep in touch. Brilliant. I'm going to end up there. Thank you very much again, and take care, and hopefully see you at the next webinar, which is going to be in February, and that's going to be looking at disadvantaged boys in the education system. Okay, thank you.